Thank you for attending the panel today to look at curriculum software and enhancing learning. I'm Dylan Jones, and I'm the chair of the BESA Export Special Interest Group. I also have my own education consultancy business, Eduvation, and I'm currently working with the British Council as the Commercial Development Director, looking at bringing English language learning to people and institutions around the world. I've got a very interesting panel with me here today, and I'll hand over to each of them to let them give a brief introduction to who they are and their background. So Dr. Sami Ibrahim, could you give a brief overview?
Okay, sure. My name is Sami. I've been working as a science teacher, so my background is science. I've been working since like 2011 as a teacher. And then gradually, with some experience, I found myself an education consultant and then an academic director in an international school here in Malaysia. I've been working in different countries, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Malaysia. Now I'm working for Discovery Education in Malaysia with TP Leaders Academy. Actually, TP Leaders Academy is the local representative, an exclusive representative for Discovery Education products in Malaysia. My interest, actually, and can say my favorite interest is in professional development and teacher training. I'm so happy to be with you here in the panel. That's pretty much what I have.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Great, good. Thank you for that, Dr. Sami. Very, very interesting to meet you. I look forward to learning more about what you've been doing with Discovery. Will Hall, would you be able to give a brief overview? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. Lovely to meet you all. My name's Will Hall. I'm a curriculum lead at Century Tech. Before I joined the company a couple of years ago, I taught maths for many years in state schools in North and South London. I left to join Century originally to help create content. I've created lots of maths content on the platform. Century, the company now that I work for, was set up by Priya Lakhani about 7 years ago. She's a social impact entrepreneur, and she's really looking at how to use advanced technology, which is what I was really interested in when I left the classroom, to try and address that kind of one-size-fits-all model. And now, having worked for Century for a couple of years, it's a pleasure to work there. It's become an award-winning teaching and learning platform using kind of artificial intelligence and neuroscience and the experience of people like myself, of educators, to support schools and students all around the world. And I'm excited today to talk about curriculum and everything that we're here today for. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Will. Alistair Cameron, could you give an overview of yourself and your background, please?
Hi, Dylan. Thank you very much. And thank you to BESA and the Bett Show for letting me be part of this interesting panel session today. My name's Alistair. I work for Just2Easy. Just2Easy is an online learning platform and creativity tool suite, providing engaging activities for children across the curriculum from K through 12, focusing predominantly on developing higher order thinking and developing skills amongst children. I've been involved in educational technology for quite a long time, it seems, over 15 years, I think. And my key focus is on professional development and ensuring that teachers are able to be effective in delivering learning through technology. And so I work with governments around the world, supporting them developing their model of teacher training. I've also done some independent consultancy in Southeast Asia, specifically working with publishers who are on a path of developing educational technology as well. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to having a discussion with all you guys this morning.
Great, thank you. So it's a it's a very interesting time in the world of curriculum software. We're all aware that COVID hasn't had an impact on every part of our lives, and some is positive, and some has obviously been very negative. But focusing in on the software, I think many of us are privileged to work in a part of the industry that's been able to support and keep the world going through the COVID period. And certainly with education, the move to online education back in the spring, and the ability of many education companies to react extremely quickly to delivering and supporting schools in home teaching and remote teaching all around the world has been quite amazing. So I guess that's a good place to start. So I'm interested to understand, maybe Will, if you could talk a little bit about how Century reacted to COVID and how that impacted what you were doing when this first started.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. I think, the last 7 months, I think, were almost solely unpredictable in what happened. That huge shift, so in kind of looking back to kind of late March, when schools were essentially shut in the UK, but for certain cohorts, we had to adapt and change almost overnight. I think there was about a 2-week window when we realized if we didn't change, I think things could have got quite serious. And so we wanted to support students and schools all around the world with our software, because what had happened leading up to that is, I think ed tech was very much used as kind of a tick box exercise, or it was there, the kind of icing on the cake in education. It added to certain bits. It was used for homework. People hadn't really relied upon it. It was never intended to remove and replace something. And so suddenly we were at the heart of what students and parents needed. And so we ran lots and lots of sessions online. We opened up our platform to parents and guardians. We opened up Century to individual students as well, so changing our model of delivery. And there was lots and lots of engagement we had to do with our stakeholders, because it's not just about providing a platform that can adapt and change and help students and to support their learning, but it's also supporting parents, supporting guardians. It's getting schools onboarded. I think I mentioned before we went live, that kind of with that kind of need and lust for ed tech in that time, it was obviously very exciting, but we had to expand and grow so quickly to support everyone. So there's a huge amount of work looking at even our training models. How do we suddenly onboard hundreds and hundreds of schools all around the world? How do we train them up? How do we make sure they can get the most out of the platform? How can we streamline our delivery? Not just kind of giving students access to Century and backing away. It was trying to grow the model we already had. And thankfully, it worked. Proud, supported thousands.
Great. You've frozen a bit there, Will. Thank you for that. Alistair, could you pick up on that? And okay, Alistair, could you pick up on developing that and just tell me how Just Too Easy picked up on that period and rose to the challenge, and some of the broader industry themes that supported you in doing that?
Thanks, Dylan. I think from what Will said, that's we're in a very fortunate position at Just Too Easy to be able to be that agile, to be able to look at what's happening in the crazy world we're living in and how it's morphing on a daily basis. I'd also like to add to that perhaps counterintuitively, a lot of schools were in a position where they couldn't provide an equitable digital approach, and a lot of praise does need to go to schools that had teachers cycling around people's houses, dropping off pieces of paper there, so that students could continue their learning. So really dedicated teachers out there. But in terms of what we did, we obviously looked at what the information that BESA were providing, and also looking at what schools were telling us that they needed. You know, our customer set is over 6,500 schools now around the world, and a lot of people got in touch with us in an absolute hurry to say, help. What can we do? None of our children are at school. None of our parents are at school. None of our staff are at school. You know, we may have used your products already, but in different ways for different purposes. What can we do? So we did two things to respond to the needs of teachers out there and parents as well. One was massively shore up our product. Just Do Easy as an online platform, you know, software as a service always has a particular trajectory in terms of its growth, and you plan in the normal world to develop your infrastructure in that sense. So when a company is presented with enormous sudden surge in use of your online tools, you need to make sure that it's always available. And companies like Microsoft were reporting, you know, crazy increases in use. You know, some of the figures that I've heard banded around are upwards of sort of 7,000 or 8,000% increase, which is phenomenal. And that leads to challenges in ensuring that you're always available service may not necessarily be so. So we wanted to make sure that what we were doing was always going to be available. So we set about doing two things. One is ensuring that teachers and staff were able to have some professional development available to them at all times. So we were continuously, and still are continuously, streaming professional development for teachers all around the world. To think about how they can use our tools for blended learning, hybrid learning, employing new ways of teaching, thinking about flipped as an idea, for example. But we also started developing additional tools. And one of the things that's really helped a lot of teachers is that a lot of teachers would typically rely on in the classroom having worksheets and some fantastic sort of PDF resources that are out there. But how do you get those out to children, and how do you continue that learning exchange between that, you know, that important communications flow between teacher and student and parent? So what we did was develop some additional software that was given completely free to all of our customers, anybody that uses Just Do Easy, so that they could, you know, it was a really simple concept. They could just take a PDF resource, upload it into our platform, and make that an instantly digitally editable, annotatable activity for children to work in, where teachers could also provide continuous support and advice and information through audio, video, etc. And that we see has really sort of you know, projected teachers forward very quickly and very easily, because they're taking something that they're very comfortable with using in the classroom, transferring it into a digital form. It's just, you know, one step in the direction of using technology effectively.
Thanks, Alistair. I think that's really interesting, and from my experience through this period with the British Council, we moved from teaching face-to-face in over 50 countries with English language teaching in face-to-face teaching centres to delivering almost everything online with synchronous face-to-face live teaching, and reacted extremely quickly to continuing to provide that service. But one of the things we also had to do was look at developing a blended learning approach, especially for younger learners, where they need the support and they need that interaction, and to have pre and post work outside the lesson, have that monitored and delivered and structured so that it's useful. And part of that was working with countries all around the world. I'm very conscious of the different approaches and the different stages of movement that happened through this period. So, Dr. Sami, I'd be really interested to understand from your perspective of discovery, but also in Malaysia, how did this kind of unfold for you, and how did you react?
Thank you, Dylan. What happened actually last semester exactly was hilarious, was something really crazy. We found that all schools are shutting down, as happened everywhere in the world. But and also the problem was because I believe it was because three different things. The first thing is because no reliable resources. There were no digital resources available for each and every single student. And the second thing is because teachers were not well prepared for such kind of approach in teaching and learning. And the third was because of the infrastructure. So we had three different problems. No reliable infrastructure, no reliable resources, and no reliable teacher training. That's why in our approach in discovery education, we are focusing on these problems. We are trying to find out the potential work in order to make this successful when we approach schools. We believe in discovery education that we have the solution for the problem. And the main problem or the main issue that we needed to focus on is how to approach schools, how to convince schools that we understand your problems and we can sort these problems out. The thing is that we found that when we just approached schools, we found a very good reflection. We found that schools are really interested to go through our products because actually we are really touching the problems. So, for example, when it comes to digital resources and digital teaching and learning, we used to say that using technology is important, but effective use of technology is much important than even using technology, because using technology is not the end of the problem. The thing is that we have to focus on the effective use of technology. The effective use of technology when it comes to the instructional methods, when it comes to the professional development programs, when it comes to each and every single activity that is present. We have to focus on effective use of technology. In Discovery Education, we are providing Discovery Education Network, which is actually very important for every teacher to have an access to it, because so many teacher resources are there, so many you can say webinars and seminars. You can say also we have like tons of teacher resources. As I said, very important to every teacher right now in order to develop himself, he has to be on such kind of communities. So to be belonging in such kind of community, international teacher community like the DAN or Discovery Education Network, it's very important to teachers. That's what we provide to teachers. The second thing is that we provide interactive or digital resources, completely digital resources. We are focusing on the student. It's student-centered, focusing on 21st century skills, and also they are, as Will said, they are tech books. And what we mean by tech books is that it's completely technologized books. Not only that, not only in technology, they are also focusing when it comes to pedagogical or the educational part. We are focusing also on the instructional methods. In science textbook, we are focusing on the 5 E's, which means that explore, engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. This instructional method in science. In mathematics, we are focusing on DPA, which is discover, practice, and apply. And STEM, we are focusing, or we are approaching with challenge, design, and solve, which means that we are not only focusing on technology and discovery education, we are also focusing on the pedagogical part and education itself. So And also, when it comes to activities, in Discovery Education, we have tons of activities that are making differentiation easily to students. And also, the differentiated lessons will be very easy to teachers as well, which means that no one will be out of queue. When we focus also on the digital learning, we have to make sure that the teaching and learning is student-centered, and the use of technology must be helping teaching and learning, and shouldn't be like a hinder or an obstacle towards teaching and learning. That's why the interface and you can say the user experience all over the system is very easy and very adaptable. So because of these things, actually, I believe Discovery Education is booming in Malaysia market, and I hope that would help the you can say the educational community in Malaysia to be more enhanced.
Thank you, Dr. Sami. I'd like to come back to efficacy and how we measure that a bit later. But just while we sort of stay focused on this kind of COVID period, one of the things that I know a lot of organizations did at the start of COVID was in a very charitable and philanthropic way, gave software away. And I think it was amazing to see the education community and the EdTech community in particular really moving quickly to support schools and education institutions around the world in having access to materials, facilitating home learning. But that was, as we were talking earlier, quite considerable cost, because Amazon and Microsoft didn't give away cloud computing for free at the same time. So everybody was paying more, doing more, and giving it away. And that then raised the question of, where do you move between that giving away free software and converting that to paid? And has that been an issue for any of the organizations that you work with, or just the industry around you that you're aware of? Alistair, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a cold, hard shock to us when we first started doing this, that the infrastructure requirements to ensure we would be stable, we would be available, always on, etc. And as you say, the cost implications are enormous. But it wasn't really something that we were going to focus on wholeheartedly. I think the most important thing for us to do was to make sure that schools did have the ability to at least try to embrace technology in a way that was enabling them to continue some form of normality in the teaching and learning process. The whole thing about free is a really tricky challenge for companies like ours to cross over in where you go from providing something for free, and it can be easily perceived as being a sort of a shameless company marketing tool to gain customer base, etc. And a lot of the time our offering for the free service, where there is an essential reason for it, has continued for over and above the time frame that we saw. But what we do tend to see by a lot of teachers is that the service that we provide can be greatly enhanced by having some sort of personal support, personal response, where a teacher can get in touch with us and say, 5 minutes before they're trying to work out how to go back into the school environment and do a mix of what about my children that are at home sheltering and or perhaps are going to have to go into isolation and quarantine for a while, or what about this group of students that are going to switch over because there's not enough room in my class to cope with these students. So for teachers to be able to have that personal touch and to be able to work out a plan of action for them using technology, which mirrors what they were originally planning to do in the classroom, has meant that we've proved really good value for schools out there as well in terms of a switch to a solution. And ours is an utterly inexpensive product anyway, so it's, you know, it falls within the remit of a class budget for sort of an impulse buy, would you say? So, you know, it hasn't been a huge issue for us to, you know, switch from free to freemium to a paid product. We do provide that sort of the value that goes with it in terms of advice and consultancy.
Thanks, Alistair. And Will, from a Sentry Tech perspective, Sentry is very much a learning platform and a content service, correct? So you can really support a school in many different ways. And how did you kind of move from that, you know, instant reaction, you know, we're really trying to help people, to you know, something that was sustainable?
Yeah, I think Alistair explained it really well with the kind of shock, the cold shock in the beginning. I think when March hit, there was really no question. It was, okay, we need to support schools around the world, and we need to give them access to Sentry. And that was a decision we made very quickly. What we put an awful lot of our effort into Sentry, though, is being there, creating content. We have a very large team that work at Sentry. So obviously that's not sustainable to have a product like Sentry to be free forever. But it was about being really clear with the schools that we were working with, and also to parents when we changed our model and gave them access themselves as well, to be really clear that eventually this will change and we'll go back to the subscription service model that we're already operating under. But to be very clear with schools that for as long as required, Sentry would be free, completely free for them, that they would have the same experience, the same access to all of our resources that our subscribing schools would get as well. And we also put a lot of time and effort during the school closure period to create new courses, to develop new ways of engaging our learners as well. So looking at kind of younger years, looking at primary school, Key Stage 2, looking at the areas, the certain cohorts within education that were more vulnerable. So, you know, you're looking at year 11s, year 7s, you know, the transition year groups. How can we best support them when they come back into the classroom? So it was really an interesting, exciting time as well, to see a company grow so much during a very difficult time, but also understanding that we can't continue that trajectory. We can't continue to be free. You know, we want to serve the best we can. We want to give technology and access and ease of access to everyone, but we also want to provide high quality service. And so it was finding a balance really between those two. And now we've got out of that, and you know, it's also about having faith in your thanks, about understanding that, look, our product is good, it's fantastic. So when we do change that model, and we've been clear with our schools, that we're confident that we'll convert and continue.
Thanks, Will. I think that clarity and that honesty and being upfront is really important in there. I'd like to go back to something we were talking about earlier and develop it, which is efficacy of the software. I believe both Dr. Sami and Will have got a teaching background in science and maths, and a number of the products that you work with have got certain levels of artificial intelligence within them. So I'd be really interested in your opinion on both you know, where curriculum software is going and the space that AI has within that, both to teach, but also to measure efficacy of the product. Dr. Sami, do you want to pick up on that?
Oh, yeah, sure. I just need to echo what Will and Alistair said regarding this kind of like the cost of the service. Actually, we can say that Discover Education is one of the institution-supported resources. And as my colleague said now, it's so hard for such kind of business model to last forever as for free resource. We cannot tolerate on this. However, we can just make the balance between providing the reliable resources and with high quality and with high level of values and with the price as well. That's why we are dealing with Discover Education, I mean the headquarter in England, on pricing, and on all these parts are very like we are controlling this together because we understand the market here very well, and we are really flexible in prices because we have a message, and this message is educational message. It's full of ethics, and the moral thing is much more than the materialistic things. So we are dealing with Discover Education in this regard. Regarding our educational software in science, I would like actually to demonstrate for a few minutes how Discover Education software can enhance teaching and learning with artificial intelligence. Can I?
We can give you 2 minutes, Sammy.
Yeah, sure. Very few minutes. I'll do my best. So, can you see my screen now?
Still see you.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay. I will have this actually called Discover Education Experience. This is the interface, including the LMS, Learning Management System, and all the parts of teaching and learning are here. So let's go for curriculum pack, which is science textbook. We have science, mathematics, social studies, STEM, coding, etc. These are the resources in science, for example. Let's go directly to one of the books or tech books, grade 1, or sorry, grade 4, within GSS, which is Next Generation Science Standards. And let's focus on only one lesson. Let's go for this lesson or this concept. You can see here the 5 E's: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. And this is the model lesson for teachers. When we click here, we go for the teacher or student edition or student view. And every step of the instructional method, we can find so many activities, interactives, and so on and so forth. Engage, explore. As I said before, it's an instructional method, which means that it will make the student directly go through the lesson without the big assistance from the teacher. The teacher is just a facilitator in the process. Here are some interactives the student can go through by himself, then explain. It's the core of the lesson, then elaborate with STEM until we go for so many things here also can be elaborated with rubrics as well. And then we go for evaluation, which is the top of the assessment part. So by this way, I can say that we can have a lot of resources, reliable resources, key rated according to the type of students. And we can say also can engage students into teaching and learning, and even students can make their or can control their own learning on their own pace. Such kind of software which is provided by Discover Education can enhance teaching and learning, especially when we are talking about COVID-19 era. Even after COVID-19, I believe the world is not going to get back as it was before COVID-19. So using such kind of technologies will last. I believe it will last. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for being.
That's okay. You've pretty much done that in 2 minutes. I think you've done well. Okay, so I know, moving on from looking at what you were showing there, I'm just thinking about what I've seen previously around Sentry Tech, actually, is this idea of AI. And so you can have, lessons that are set up by curriculum developers, But I think for me, a really interesting development in this sector is how that can then be personalized, and how individual learning journeys can be developed and can change and iterate to the individual, personalizing learning. Will, do you want to talk a little bit about how we can, as the title of this session is, enhance learning with curriculum software through that personalization using technology, where, you know, to a certain extent the technology is replacing the skills of a teacher?
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. First thing I'd say though is kind of thing we constantly say at Sentry is that our software, our platform, is not to replace anyone or anything. It's to augment really what goes on within the classroom. The human side of teaching, it cannot be replicated whatsoever. But what you can do is to then look at what tech can do better than a person. And there are lots of things it's better at. It's better at triggering. It's better at adapting and changing and offering, and kind of this optimization and the pathways that you were talking about. So we look at, there's 3 disciplines we look at in Sentry: data science, or machine learning, neuroscience, and learning science, pedagogy, to the people here today. So my team will create these huge courses. So we take a maths course, we'll make 1,000 micro lessons. We'll chunk that entire course down using our experience as teachers and humans, and having taught these subjects for many, many years. But what we don't want to do is just to deliver that course to someone. You know, you don't just give a textbook to a student and leave them to it. So this is where technology then steps in. It's about finding the individual strengths and weaknesses of students. This is now what tech is better at. The man hours that go into marking to get that level of feedback, a system like Sentry can do it in 20 minutes, right? And so what you find then is that you now have a pathway of lessons where the system is helping you, because everyone is different within your class. Everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. But we can take that further as well and look at retention. So if we look at, the forgetfulness curve, that testing works, it's proven to work, it aids retention. It's the reason we have curricula that are spiralized and we revisit things. But of course, everyone thinks differently, and everyone has different memory, different retention rates. So again, this is looking at something that tech can do better than a person, in that it can adapt and reassess a learner based on them, based on their retention, to re-deliver information, which is incredibly hard when you have 30 students who all think differently, who all understand different parts of your lesson, different parts of the curriculum, might not like your lesson that much as well. You're often going to find as a teacher that you will teach somewhat to the middle to try and cover all bases. Often then giving quite a lot of support as well to learners that struggle. It's about then, the reason why I use the word augment is what good technology can do, good educational technology, is to give breathing space for teachers, is to offer a space for learners where they can have personalized intervention, essentially, to find those misconceptions and those gaps, and to give data to teachers. That's really the key here on the other side. It's enable them to teach. And what stops them teaching is creating reams and reams of data. What we want teachers to be doing is to react to data, to make those interventions, to use human intervention, because, as I said before, that's the most important part of learning. It's the emotional side, it's the support, it's the explanations from educators that you trust. And good tech can enable that to work better, to free up teachers. So it's a fine balance really between those 3 disciplines.
Great, that's very useful. I think the idea of adaptive learning is extremely powerful in moving through, but it's also, as you said right at the start, impossible to replace the teacher. And Alistair, you talked earlier a little bit about how you were working with professional development with people using Just Too Easy, and I think that's really important, and that's something that is difficult when you're not able to go and visit people. But it's also, I think, difficult in even pre-COVID. It was becoming very difficult from an environmental perspective and from a cost perspective to go around to every school and train them how to use your software. You can't drive across any country and say, yeah, I'm turning up for an hour session and think, well, the fuel that's involved, the cost involved in sending somebody there, when potentially your software, is a £200, £500, whatever a year, subscription. You've spent that in going to the school, or certainly you've spent the margin in going to just that one school once, or more than. So, Alistair, how have you picked up on professional development? How do you see that moving forward in the future?
Yeah. So just to give you a little bit of understanding about what Just Do Easy is and how it works, to answer that most effectively, we provide a learning management solution plus creativity tools for across the curriculum learning. We're not in the space that my colleagues here are all in terms of delivery of content. We're at the point where we provide a system for children to develop their understanding and demonstrate that their understanding and ability, and to be able to take that to the next stage. If you want to follow the Bloom's model, I guess, we're at the point where we allow and enable children to analyze, synthesize, and recreate their own learning. So we've sort of what we've done is ensure that we follow a model that we try to instill across schools throughout this pandemic. And that has simply been that there's been such a sort of a rush for teachers to sort of embrace digital in any way, shape or form possible. And a lot of teachers have gone out there with the belief that, jumping on a Zoom call and continuing to teach is what they should be doing. And the level of engagement, the level of motivation plummets at that point. Sitting there and listening to even anything above a 20-minute lesson is torture for anybody. And children oftentimes don't want to participate. I know children that for whatever reason don't want to get on a Zoom call, are uncomfortable with doing that, or a Teams call, etc. So what we've been doing is sort of eating our own dog food, so to speak. In what we try to instill across teachers is to adopt a sort of a mix-up of Blooms, where typically in the classroom you would be delivering the knowledge in the lesson, making sure that was understood in the lesson, and then the homework task might be to go and write about it, and develop your understanding, practice and reinforce that. So what we're doing is giving the tools and the provision for teachers to be able to allow children to, especially with this new and next normal of whatever life is going to throw at us, or however schooling is going to exist as we go into phase 2, or as I understand it in Malaysia in particular is going through the third tranche of this pandemic coming up again, is giving tools to teachers and the ability for students to acquire the knowledge in their own terms without having to go on lengthy Zoom calls, and then build on that knowledge in the classroom, so that the technology is affording them the tools to develop their own understanding, demonstrate their own understanding, but also mix that up and collaborate and share their experience and learn knowledge and where they're going with that back in the classroom. That's effectively what we are doing. I guess in terms of going back to the previous question, the efficacy of what we're enabling schools and teachers themselves is demonstrated through the creativity that their children provide in terms of what they're producing, perhaps in blog work or work that they're collaborating and sharing within the classroom. But to answer your question, Dylan, sorry, it's a long-winded way of answering that question, is in terms of professional development, we work with governments. We work with, we launched live to the whole of Vietnam to provide our tools to the country of Vietnam. So it's over 19 million kids. We provide our software to every single school in London. So that's 2,500 schools. provide our software to the Welsh government, so that's over 2,000 and something or other schools. We kind of lose track of that. What we do is provide a lot of tailor-made professional development to particular needs and requirements of a market. So for Vietnam, where access to technology is limited, we're providing very small, bite-sized particular resources that are focused on on building knowledge, building confidence in using technology in a nice and simple and easy way for them to be able to embrace. And then also our professional development is again tailored en masse for the Welsh government, Welsh curriculum, or the British curriculum, or the Malay curriculum, etc.
Great.
We're embedded into our product.
That's really good, and it sounds like you do an awful lot to support and ensure teachers and educationalists can use your product. As a final point in the last kind of 8 minutes, I'd like to hear from each of you how you think gamification can enhance learning. Can we learn from the addictiveness of apps and the use of streaks or different things like that? And is it right to try and make your learning, teaching and learning products addictive in the same way that games are? Sammy, why don't you kick that off?
That's a good point. Actually, from the point of view as a teacher, I can say that gamification is good, but it has to be depending on the so many criteria, or we can say rubrics for it. We have to take care, number one, on the lesson type itself. I mean, the topic. Not all lessons has the ability to be gamified. The second thing is the type of student, or we can say the learner style. Also controlling the gamification thing. The third is the kind of technology infrastructure in school, and every school. But this is generally. When it comes to discovery education, actually, we are taking care of this as well. We have gamifying everything, even the website itself. I mean, how easy is it? It's like a game for students. We are gamifying this as well. And we have on the interactive lessons in science, in mathematics, and even in social studies, we have games. But we are taking care of what I said. We are taking care of the topic that the teacher is teaching, and the learner type, and also the infrastructure. So basically, yeah, I believe gamification is important, and I tried this in my classes before. When students are being taught through games, it's much more effective and really important to use in the school.
Okay, thanks, Sammy. Will, you're previously a maths teacher, and maths is one of those curriculum areas that really can be gamified and has been done successfully by a number of different products out there that certainly my children used when they were at school. Dr. Sammy's correct, though, on, one of them really loved it and tried to get that certificate. The other one hated it and just thought, I'm not learning anything with this. It's just, I don't know what I'm doing because the teacher's not taught me and the software's not teaching me. It's just testing me.
Yeah, I think when we look at gamification, take some positive elements. I'm not a huge fan of the concept of gamification, but one element of playing games is resilience, right? It's wanting to improve. It's wanting to get better, to try at it. We don't use what you would call gamification really on Sentry in the style of presenting games to students. I think games can engage for a short time. I think you lose engagement afterwards because you can't really compete with the best games manufacturers on the planet to really keep students or children's attention. But what you can do is learn from the core tenets of gamification, i.e. displaying scores, color coding scores, wanting students to try again, wanting students to improve, showing their data, how they're improving their completion rates. There's lots of elements of what we would consider gamification that can, I think, really benefit students, especially in using platforms. But I think it's a very fine line to tread between, as you said earlier on, getting, what's the outcome here? What we want to create our learners is independence and agency. We don't necessarily want to trick students into using something, but it's finding the core part of gamification that we all love. We all want to improve. We all want to see ourselves get better at something. And that's what you see in games, really. So yeah, I think tread the line.
Great, thanks. Alistair, one thing that I've noticed that games are different now to 10 years ago that my kids play is that they're very much community games. They get on and they're social games. They're still shooting things, but they're doing it with their mates. And can we use that collaborative aspect of modern gaming in learning more?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a complete fan of it, and I don't know why you don't admit, Dylan, that you as well as I probably play some of these games, and we absolutely learn from them. And you're right, the collaborative nature of these things, Fortnite and now Minecraft are ultimately hugely collaborative on a global scale, and we've taken advantage of that as well in a light touch way. Just Too Easy has two games built in, which are the easy and obvious ones for us to embrace, which are spelling, context, and obviously maths as well. So we support Cambridge curriculum all the way through IGCSE from reception onwards for gaming, and making that as fun as you possibly can. But what we've done is we've opened that up to sort of a global gamified base, so that children can compete in private games where they're just playing in a class by themselves, or they can have not a collaborative game as such, but a game where they're actually racing their times tables against children from around the world, or having a spelling contest, a spelling bee with children around the world. And I was actually doing one live the other day with a group of children in Chile. So we were combining the whole face-to-face thing as well as doing the game online at the same time, which was absolutely fabulous. And that makes it so much more of a learning opportunity for children too, because not only are they learning about their times tables and practicing that, but where's that flag from? And that leads on into other conversations about what language do they speak, and how old are these children that are playing against us. So you can open up a wide variety of learning opportunities just from playing that one game, which does other things. And the response that we get from it is, when we first launched Spell Blast, we had over 50,000 games played in, I think it was like the first day.
Wow. That's great. Okay, I'm conscious of time. I'd like to thank all of our panelists today, Dr. Samuel Ibrahim, Will Hall, and Alistair Cameron, and also thank BESA for giving us the opportunity to talk about the best of British and the state of curriculum software and how it can enhance learning around the world. I think we live in interesting times. We work in a very interesting industry, and I think that the future is bright for continuing development and use of curriculum software around the world. So thank you all very much for your time, and I look forward to hopefully one day actually meeting you in person. Would be good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you all.